Hello everybody and welcome to Spiritual Metaphysics 101. My name is Jerry Yakov and I'm your host. I'm also a student and teacher of Spiritual Metaphysics and Spiritual Awakening. And recently I've been toying with the idea of changing the title of our episodes. It's been known for the last 3 years as Spiritual Metaphysics 101. The slight change that I'm thinking about making is entitling it Spiritual Awakening 101. And the reason I'm interested in making that switch is because metaphysics, I think, is a word that's not quite understood. It's very esoteric, and it's difficult probably for most of us to grasp. What is metaphysics? And I'm not going to get into the definition right now. Needless to say, that's the title that we've been using, and it's really about the spiritual world, spiritual metaphysics, rather than the physical world of the body. However, spiritual awakening, people understand awakening. And if we change the title of the show to Spiritual Awakening 101, I think we might interest more people, and they won't think that it's such a college-level class. It's going to be about awakening. And this is a very Buddhist view as well. It's a 12-step view. The 12th step of the 12 steps says having had a spiritual awakening. So, and I find that as a lifestyle, being involved in a religion, a theology, a spirituality, a philosophy of life results in awakening. We can't be as unaware, as unmindful as we've been. Okay, the reason I'm even talking about this slight change in the title of the show, if and when we do it, is because I want to focus on the awakening that occurs within each one of us. That's the point, I think, that we can set as a goal. Spiritual awakening. What does that result in? What does that give us? I think it gives us peace of mind and serenity, first and foremost. There's nothing like having the peace and serenity that passes all understanding. Once we have that, then we're free, then we're joyful, then we're truly as the spirit within us would extend itself and would identify itself, free and joyful. But we have to be awake. There's a presence that is involved there. There's a mindfulness, an astuteness. And again, I'm not talking about theory. I'm not talking about having any particular powers that other people don't have. This is an awareness that's within each one of us. But if we're asleep, and I literally mean asleep in the mind, if the mind is asleep, then we can't be joyful. Then we can't be peaceful and serene. It's an impossibility. We can pleasure with outside stimuli. We can look to the false idols in the world for some kind of hiding place from the sorrow and the suffering and the pain. But that's not true peace. That's not true aliveness. That isn't what we're talking about in a spiritual awakening. Spiritual awakening is of the essence. And when one is essentially one's self, then you're happy, joyous, and free, and you're awake. Let's talk about mindfulness a little bit, and then we'll get into some of the readings for today that I want to share with you. Mindfulness is a decision that we make. Now, what that means, and it's basically on a conscious level, I'm deciding to be spiritually awake today, right now in this moment. I may be eating, I may be walking, I may be driving my car, I may be talking with people, I might simply be by myself. Doesn't matter. The inner journey, the inner mindful state is a decision. Now, I could be outer directed, and that means I'm thinking about my acquisitions, the challenges that are seemingly outside of myself, the people and their approval or lack of approval, my likes and dislikes concerning things outside of myself. That's an outwardly mindless decision, because the world keeps changing. Everything is in chaotic disarray or evolution, however you want to see it. There's no centeredness. There's no way that peace can be accomplished given the changes. If you've ever tuned into the news on the radio or television and tried to have a peaceful experience while being outwardly focused on the reporting of the day, or even listening to other people's stories about their lives and their feelings, which change from moment to moment, or even thinking about your own moods and changes, what that involves basically is an outward manifestation of an inner condition. We want to focus not on the outer manifestation, but on the inner condition, and that is our state of mind. State of mind consists of one of two thought systems: the ego thought system or the spiritual thought system. Being mindful means we make a decision for the spiritual thought system, for faith, if you will, for the Holy Spirit, for the Buddha, the Christ, the light within. However you want to talk about it, it's a mindful decision. And when we make that, then we are on the path of peacefulness and serenity. The other thought system is the thought system of the ego, and that's always outwardly manifesting, and the attention is distracted by the ebb and flow, the comings and the goings, the ups and the downs. It's a binary system. It's a bilateral system. Dualistic, I think that's the term that most spiritual treatises talk about. We have to get out of the dualistic thought system, away from dualism to a non-dualistic thought system. Well, let's talk about that a little bit further with the first reading. This is a workbook lesson from A Course in Miracles, which is my spiritual path. A Course in Miracles is divided basically into two major sections: the text, which we will not be reading today, and then the workbook lessons, and there are 365 workbook lessons. The first one that I want to look at with you is entitled, I Am as God Created Me. Now this particular workbook lesson is entitled 3 different times in 3 different workbook lessons, I Am as God Created Me. Now the body of the workbook lessons, of course, is a little different and talks in different terms, but the content is virtually the same. So we're going to focus on lesson 110, which is one of the 3 workbook lessons that's entitled, I Am as God Created Me. Listen to this first introductory paragraph and see how it fits into what we were talking about, the inner journey, the non-dualistic decision for mindfulness, awakening, a spiritual awakening. It says, I am as God created me. We will repeat today's idea from time to time. This is reference to, there's 3 different workbook lessons with the same title. For this one thought would be enough to save you and the world if you believed that it is true. Well, we don't believe that we are as God created us. Now that's an interesting conundrum, because the Bible tells us God created us. Most of us in the Judeo-Christian or even the Islamic or Buddhist world, well, not the Buddhist, I can't talk about that, but the Islamic world would say, yes, we're a creation of Allah or of God, or of the holy, well, it would be God. It would be a theistic creation story like in Genesis. But here the Course in Miracles is saying we don't believe that we are as God created us. Now, how can it say that? The reason is this, and this is a cosmological distinction. Cosmologically, we aren't our body. So if we believe that God created us as the bodies that we think we are, the Course in Miracles is saying you're mistaken. You don't believe you're as God created you. God created you as a soul or a mind or a spirit. God did not create you in that body. That body was a function of, or a creation of, your ego thoughts after the fall or the separation or the decline from true awareness and knowledge and wisdom. It's a big difference. So most of us are stuck in the thought that we're a body. And given that thought, this workbook lesson is extremely important, because he's saying here, this one thought that you're as God created you, as a spirit, as a soul, as a mind, would save you and the world if you believed that it was true. And you'd have to give up your thought that you're a body. This is the challenge, I think, of deciding against the ego thought system and for the Holy Spirit, or the spiritual thought system. That is, I would say, foundational in my teaching. But let's go on a little bit. Its truth would mean that you are as God created you, that you have made no changes in yourself, as the ego has thought by making a body, and that have reality, nor changed the universe, so that what God created was replaced by fear and evil, misery and death. Well, that was what the ego thought system, which we've embraced, has seemed to generate, is a world of misery and fear and evil and death. You know, you're born, you suffer, and then the body dies. The Course is taking a very diametrically opposed, and opposition is not really the right word, because the Spirit doesn't oppose anything. Spirit is just truth, and it's the way it is. And the truth is that we are not a body which lives in misery and suffers and then dies. We're an eternal spirit. We're an eternal mind which is made in the likeness and image of God, and it's immortal and eternal, timeless, changeless, no form. That's what we're learning in this spiritual path that I'm teaching, spiritual awakening. Here's a rhetorical question for oneself. Can I awaken to my true identity as soul or as mind, and vigilantly put aside the notion that I'm my body, with all the weaknesses and the misery and the death and the chaos, the dualism? This is why it's a dualistic thought system of the ego. Dualism means that there's at least a separation. There's my body, which I've considered made by me, parentheses, you know, I'm made by God, but we don't really believe that. We believe we've made our personalities, we've made our way in the world, we've made our identity and our resources and our survival. People always like to say, I'm a survivalist. Well, doesn't that then exclude the true creator, which is God? There's an earlier workbook lesson that says, I am sustained by the love of God. I'm not a survivalist. I'm created in his image and likeness. Anyway, the dualism is, I see your body over there, you're the object, and I'm the subject of my thoughts. And I'm a body as well in the ego thought system. So we want to learn and train and discipline our minds to put that aside and come from a whole other thought system, which is one of spirituality, particularly as the Course teaches it through the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit never forgets our true identity as a creation of God. We tend to forget and fall asleep over and over and over again. Actually, we only fell asleep for a brief fraction of a moment, and then were restored, or actually our identity was never lost. But there was a brief, tiny mad idea that we entertained that we could be other than as God created us. And in that tiny instant, a tiny mad idea, the whole world and the universe seemed to be created. The truth is that that was a causeless experience. Ideas could never leave their source. So the thought that, you know, we're separate and that we could be an ego and a body and in the midst of all these other bodies and the universe and all the cosmos, that was impossible. So there was really no cause and there was no effect. It's an illusion. This is the second great teaching of A Course in Miracles. The body and the world is an illusion. And we have to be asleep and dreaming, literally dreaming of a false identity, to really experience our life, as we call it, in the body, in the world. And then, of course, we die. Birth, suffering, and death. So let's go on a little bit. It says here, if you remain as God created you, fear has no meaning. Evil is not real. And misery and death do not exist. So the whole projection, if you will, from the ego thought system evaporates into the nothingness from which it came when we're restored to the true spiritual identity as God created us. Then we're in our right minds. Then we are mindful. Then we are truly in the awareness that I am as God created me. One of the things that I always use at the end of these episodes is the closing remark, from this workbook lesson. And I always say, please remember at the end of the workbook lesson, you are as God created you. I am as God created me. And therein, as it says, if we would only believe that, it would save us in the world. That one thought alone. Paragraph 2. Today's idea is therefore all you need to let complete correction heal your mind and give you perfect vision that will heal all the mistakes that any mind has made at any time or place. So this idea that we're as God created us takes away, if you will, all of the projections of sin, guilt, and fear that the ego traffics in. If my sinful thoughts, guilt-ridden thoughts, and fearful thoughts all evaporate because I've chosen to identify as the soul, pure, innocent, guiltless, and sinless, then all the guilt and the sin and the fear dissipates or disappears, and you know what disappears along with it? The projected perception of a world as I had known it. And therein lies my peace and serenity, because it was the projection of sin, guilt, and fear that led me to believe that the world was a scary place, and that all the circumstances and all the story and the drama caused me to be upset, and I didn't have peace. But once I'm relieved of that false identity as a body, and I'm in my right mind, and I've made that decision purposefully, awakedly, mindfully, then all, as it says here, you have perfect vision, and it'll heal all the mistakes that our ego mind had made. It's enough to heal the past and make the future free. Now this is glorious, because all of our perception really is based in the past. I had this direct experience today. My wife and I went to a church that we hadn't visited for quite a while. And naturally there were people there that I hadn't seen in quite a while. So as I'm going around and seeing people that I remembered, I noticed that my mind was looking in the file folders as to people's past histories with me and how I identified them. And that's how, even if I couldn't remember their names, I remembered stories about them from prior experiences. Now the Course is very clear about that. That is not a direct experience of a brother or a sister. That is a previous ego thought based in concept. I liked or didn't like somebody, they were nice, they weren't nice, I felt comfortable, I didn't feel comfortable, they treated me well and showed me respect or didn't show me respect last time. All of that came into play in a fraction of a second in that experience today. And it was so interesting because our minds have so much over these computers today. You think the computers are fast. Our minds are super lightning fast. But the point that we're in the context of this workbook lesson is that we want to see ourselves and others not from the past or a projected image of the future and our fears. We want to see it guiltless, sinless, and innocent. And the only way to see it is in the now, in the awakening moment of right now as a spirit, as God created us. And then what comes through us is a natural inclination to extend love, extend forgiving thoughts, compassionate thoughts, identification with each other as the same. I don't see them as different based on their past in my mind. We're the same. It's another brother. It's the Christ in me acknowledges the Christ in you. It's the namaste salutation. The Spirit in me acknowledges the Spirit in you. Well, let's go on a little bit. It says, if you remain as God created you, appearances cannot replace the truth. Health cannot turn to sickness, nor can death be substitute for life, or fear for love. Well, that bears a little commenting right there. As God created us, we're not a body. So health is perfect. It's only the body that's subject to the illnesses that we conceptualize, diseases, disabilities, and so forth. All this has not occurred if you remain as God created you. You need no thought but just this one, to let redemption come to light the world and free it from the past. So we don't need any other thought system. There is no other thought system. The only thought system that exists really in actuality is the thought system of God. That's all there is. The thought system of the ego, with all of its complications and all of its dualism and confusion, is totally a fabrication. It's totally made up. And that's why there's no unanimity or peace in the world, because none of us can match my ego thought system with another person's ego thought system, where we're consistently together in a joining. You can't join ego thought systems. God thought systems, spiritual, love-based thought, true love-based thought systems are the same. There's no difference. There's no separation. So there's a total joining. And in the joining is the peace. In the dissociation, in the separation with the ego, that's where all of the upsets occur. And because of that, the world seems to be a mess. But there's nothing that we experience in the world that we haven't first thought in our minds. This is incredibly important to realize and to understand. The world is an outpicturing of our thoughts in our mind. And the mind is not the brain. We're not talking about the body. And of course the brain is part of the body. What we're talking about is the mind. And I can't define the mind. It's not something that is definable in terms of time and space. There's no such thing. The mind is a metaphysical reference to that which God created. God is the ultimate mind, extending and creating out as the sun would extend and send out sunlight. And so there would be light waves, and that's what our minds are. It's referred to in A Course in Miracles as the Christ mind. But that is aphysical, metaphysical. It has nothing to do with the brain. The brain is another part of the body that the mind controls. If you'd like, think about a puppeteer and a puppet. The puppeteer is the mind, and we control that with our thoughts and the decision-making process. The puppet is the body. It's a lifeless piece of wood, if you will, and it only takes signals from the mind. So that's why a mind disciplinary program, which is what A Course in Miracles is all about, and so many other paths, spiritual paths, are mind disciplinary programs. You know, the Course says that an undisciplined mind can't accomplish anything. And it's true. Have you ever found yourself, when you're stuck in the ego mind system, the thought system, you feel like you're so helpless and powerless, and it's frustrating because you're so conflicted. There's no confliction. There is no conflicting thoughts in a pure, innocent, sinless, guiltless, spiritual mind. And that's what we call transcending the ego. When we transcend the ego thought system, and we know we're as God created us in the Holy Spirit or the Buddha or the Tao, then we know who and what we are. And we experience peace and serenity. That is the truth. That is true life. I want to make a distinction between false life and true life. False life would be life in the body, as we've been talking about, well, with all of the ups and downs and the aches and the pains and the likes and the dislikes, the dualistic idea of birth and life and death, which is not our identity, which is not our life. Life is immortal. It's eternal. That's why time, there is no time. How can there be time in an eternal thought system? Eternal means that there is no segments, there's no separations, there's no fragments. It's all one seamless eternity. And that's our existence as life, true life with a capital L. Well, let me conclude. I know we're kind of running out of time in this episode, but let's conclude with the latter paragraph here. So it says, in this one thought is all the past undone, the present saved to quietly extend into a timeless future. If you are as God created you, then there has been no separation of your mind from His, no split between your mind and other minds, and only unity within your own. Well, this is exactly what we've been talking about. All of the dissociation, all of the separation, the problems with conflict and splitting minds is undone in this one thought. And it could be a mantra for the day. I am as God created me. You are as God created you. What peace and serenity there is in that. It's the most fulfilling, most freeing thought that you could possibly have. As it says here, this one thought, if you truly bought it, would result in enlightenment. We would probably be completely enlightened if we didn't take back our ego minds so greedily and so fearfully and say, well, wait a minute, I am a body. I am still this person with, my opinion, and I'm right about my opinion. And particularly, as the Course says, it's a judgmental one against other people. So the ego mind says, I'm right and you're wrong. And look at your wrongness, both in your attitude and even your demeanor and your behavior towards me has really been a disrespectful. Well, the Course says what we're thinking is, behold me, brother, at your hand I die. That's really the ideation of the ego. Even what the Course calls special love and special hate relationships are involved with the thought. And then remember, as we said earlier, if you have the thought, you're going to perceive it this way. You're going to perceive, behold me, brother, at your hand I'm suffering. It's you that's the problem. Me, I'm the face of innocence, and you can't blame me. Yes, I've made myself the way I am, I suppose, but then in my face of innocence, which is a mask, what really is happening is that you're not playing according to the rules. You've stolen my innocence. You've victimized me. I am the one that's the victim and you're the victimizer. This is the scenario of the dream that we're dreaming as a body. So we want to awaken from the dream. And as the dreamer of the dream, who's in a better position to wake up but the dreamer? And when we realize, first and foremost, that we're as God created us, then we have a chance of awakening from the ego dream, or nightmare, as I like to call it. So, in summation, let me just share with you that we are as God created us, lesson 110 in a workbook lesson of A Course in Miracles. Consider reading A Course in Miracles. We'll have a graphic at the end of the show that'll tell you where to buy it and how to get it online and so forth. There's also going to be a graphic on how to reach me if you're interested in coaching. I do that, and it's my privilege and my honor if anyone's interested. Be that as it may, you are as God created you. I am as God created me. And in that we shall know the peace and serenity that is our true inheritance, because that is what God intended for us. Peace and serenity, joy and freedom, and complete collaboration with each other in that joy and that peace. Namaste, shalom, and peace. And we'll see you next time. Bye now.